Hi, I'm Tyson with Adventure Rig, and Callie and I have now put about 6,000 miles on the Black Dog Cycle Works Ultimate skid plate. I have this mounted on my KTM 890 Adventure. Callie has hers mounted on the 790 Adventure bike. Now, we just got back from Central America, and we're currently based in Baja for about the next month. We've put about 1,500 miles of off-road use on the skid plates, and then the Central America trip was honestly a lot of touring on the road, so we didn't really beat the skid plates to death like we did with our off-road use prior to heading down to Central America. I'm really impressed with the overall quality of this skid plate, especially when you compare it to the stock. This is 3/16 inch aluminum, and it is heavy duty. It's coming in at almost 11 pounds compared to the stock skid plate, which is about 1/16 of an inch thick. And if you grab it, you can actually twist the stock skid plate with your hands when it's not on the bike. I knew that that was one of the first upgrades that we wanted to make for these motorcycles, especially in the off-road environment. This one did not disappoint. Couple key features that I like about this is that on the front of the skid plate here, this is where you'd have your two tank protectors mounting. And then right underneath this are 3 different bolts, and you can actually separate this top half of the skid plate from the bottom half of the skid plate. So when you go to do maintenance, you can leave all of this attached to the bike, remove the 3 bolts here, as well as the 2 bolts that are on the bottom of the skid plate. You can then slip the bottom half of the skid plate off and do things like oil changes. What's also nice about this 2-piece design is if you are using aftermarket crash bars like Hepco Becker, SW Motec, or TourTech, you can actually leave all of those on as well as this top piece here and not have to remove crash bars in order to do simple things like an oil change. Another great feature about this skid plate is that it doesn't bolt physically to the engine at all. The stock skid plate bolted directly underneath into the oil pan. What Black Dog has done is off of your foot peg brackets, they've actually included another bracket that goes from one foot peg underneath to the other foot peg. Therefore, it's tying both foot pegs together, and then the skid plate mounts to that bracket. Now that bracket stays bolted on the bike. Once you initially install it, you don't have to remove it again. This is great because not only does it reinforce both of your foot pegs, but it's also an awesome reinforcement point for this skid plate to attach to. Nice little peace of mind knowing that when I beat the absolute living hell out of this bike, I'm not going to damage any of the mounting points. Speaking of mounting, another feature that I like about what Black Dog is doing are these U-bolts here. So this is where the stock tank guards would bolt in. You've got the 2 on each side there. And then on the inside of the skid plate, you can see that these 3 bolts here are also threaded into these U-nuts, and on their bracket that they provide, again, those are threaded into U-nuts. Why I like this is because the holes that the U-nuts are around are a little bit larger than the U-nut themselves. What this does is it provides a little bit of movement with each U-nut. I like this because if you've ever had aftermarket motorcycle items, maybe one time you bolt it up and it fits perfect, everything is lined up. You take it off for whatever reason to do maintenance or a repair, you put it back on and it doesn't even come close to lining back up. That's just something that I feel like all motorcycles are like. But with the Black Dog, because all of this stuff moves a little bit, I never have any problem lining bolts up and threading it back in. Also, if you were to happen to misalign a bolt and actually cross thread one of these U-nuts, you can easily take it off and replace it with another U-nut if you need to. This is great because if you were to cross thread, say something that's actually threaded on there and mounted permanently, that's gonna be a bummer and a lot bigger of a chore to fix than just replacing a U-nut. Also, the 3 bolts that are on the front here, as well as these 2 that are on the back, these are just 5mm Allen bolts. And then the 4 bolts that hold this front part, the upper portion of the skid plate onto the bike, those are just a T30 that they provide as well. Why I mention this is because your stock toolkit that comes with the bike is already going to have a 5mm Allen wrench in it, and it's going to have your T30 Torx bit as well. So you're going to be able to remove this skid plate and do anything that you need to with the stock tools that come with the KTM. The fit and finish of the skid plate is top notch, like anything that you'd expect from Black Dog. So not only have they powder coated this, but they also add a clear coat to it. Now this isn't going to be a miracle worker. We've gone off-road, like I said, and you can see that where the rocks are kicked up from the front tire, there are numerous rock chips throughout the front of this, as well as some rock chips going along the bottom, and then we've hit some rocks along the way, and so the paint has chipped off there. It's not going to rust because it is aluminum, and again, I'm not expecting miracles. I'm very happy with how the finish has held up, but don't expect that if you're hitting rocks with it, that the finish is going to damage the rock instead of the rock damaging the finish. An additional option that I like that Black Dog has done with this skid plate is that if you're used to their older skid plates, I personally had one on my old 990, great skid plate. It came in like this steel gray color, like a hammered gray, and it looked great on that bike. There was gray on the 990, it matched it really well. But for this bike, they've actually done two different colors. The black that we have here, and then on my bike, the white. And honestly, we got the white because we wanted something different. We didn't want to be exactly the same. And I didn't think I wanted it on my bike. And I was like, Callie, you can take the black. You always seem to get the ones that I don't want. I was like, you can take the black one, I'll take the white. Really, both of us, honestly, like the white a lot better. It just really sticks out, has a ton of pizzazz, and it just looks really nice with the KTM colors because there's white on both the 890 as well as the 790. A little bit more subtle is the black, nothing wrong with it, but man, that white looks really nice. When you do find yourself using the skid plate as it's intended to, you're gonna find that the bottom of it is nice and smooth. So all of the bolts, the two that mount at the back, as well as these three up here, and these are actually holding a piece on the inside of the skid plate here. That's all they're doing. You don't have to remove them when you're removing the skid plate itself, but all of this stuff is flush with the skid plate. There's not any holes that will grab. There's not any bolts that are sticking out or rivets or anything like that. This is nice and smooth. If you're going over rocks or logs, you're not going to get hung up on the skid plate. It's also a sleek design once it's mounted on the bike, so it still provides optimal ground clearance. There's going to be a little bit of a gap around all of the parts of the bike. So between the exhaust and the skid plate, between the engine or the header and the skid plate, they're going to have a gap there. So if you were to actually hit something hard enough that you deform the skid plate, maybe put a large dent in it, you're not going to then contact whatever is directly behind the skid plate. If it was just a super tiny gap or maybe it was touching it, that force would just be transferred into the part directly behind it. It actually wouldn't be doing any protecting. So they've provided a nice crush zone that's going to protect all of the parts. And we have an aftermarket Aero exhaust on this bike. Not only is it a slip-on, but then the mid-pipe we ended up replacing as well. And this skid plate provides ample protection for this aftermarket exhaust as well as your stock exhaust, if that happens to be what is still on your bike. I mentioned earlier that Black Dog provides this bracket on the back here that ties the two foot pegs together. The one downside that I see to this whole system is that you can't have a center stand mounted with this skid plate because of the bracket that they're mounting the skid plate to. Now I say that as it's a negative. However, my bike, I bought it used and it came with a center stand on it. I absolutely hated it because the spring on the center stand was not strong enough, and whenever going off-road, my center stand would literally slap down going over large bumps or off drops, and it would hit the ground, and then it would slam back up into the bike. It was the most annoying thing that I've ever had on a motorcycle. So it was one trip with that, and then I immediately removed it. However, center stands are great because if you need to do a trail side repair, such as a flat tire, prop it up on the center stand and you have easy access to do either the front or the back. However, Black Dog has thought about that, and on this side of the skid plate you can see that there's a hole right here, kind of in the center of the bike, And then up front, there's another hole here. And it's not their trail stand, but there's a company that makes this device called the trail stand. You can order it with the skid plate if you want. And you can either insert the trail stand into the front hole if you need to change the front tire, or into this back hole if you need to change the back tire. What's great about this is a center stand is this huge, bulky, heavy item. The trail stand, as you can see, is much smaller and lighter. It easily fits in our Moscow toolkit. If we have any flats, we can take it out, prop it in either the front or the back hole, get the bike up onto either the front or the back, and easily change a flat tire. Now, with that said, we did do a ride in Idaho where we forgot the trail stand, and we had to use some logs and rocks to prop the bike up onto the skid plate. We were very happy to have the skid plate because there was absolutely no damage that was going to happen with having to do a trailside repair like this. The skid plate easily supports the 500 pounds or more of motorcycle that you have, depending on how you have it loaded and that kind of thing. But if I was getting this skid plate, I would definitely recommend adding the trail stand to it so that you can change your flats if you happen to encounter one. And finally, like all of Black Dog's products, this skid plate is proudly made in the USA. If you guys have any questions about this product, please leave them in the comment section below and we'll get back to you. Also, you may notice that we have some aftermarket pegs on this bike, and those are also Black Dog's foot pegs. Another great addition if you're going to be adding the skid plate. Why not just get a ton of bling and do it all at once? Thanks again for watching. I'm Tyson with Adventure Rig. If you guys are ever wondering where we are or what we're up to, check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Adventure Rig.